We made this.
Hello and welcome everyone to Blair Witch Minute, a podcast looking at 1999's seminal found footage horror movie, The Blair Witch Project, 1 minute at a time. I'm your host, Tony Black, and this minute begins at 3 minutes precisely as we see Heather Donahue interviewing a local waitress as to whether she believes in the Blair Witch, and ends on 3 minutes 59 seconds with Heather beginning the introduction to the town of Burkittsville. And to join me to discuss the first little signs of the Blair Witch Project, as it were, within the film being filmed, is Mike Jozic.
Hello, hello.
Mike, hello. This is a minute where we start to see the film itself go into production. So I think it's a good minute, this one, I think, to establish Heather's style and how she's trying to do this. I think they talk about it on the commentary about how she lacks any sense of irony. There is a student film pretension about the way she presents this, and I think it's interesting because I think you need to have these moments in order to establish kind of what the film within a film is trying to do in this movie.
It's something that initially irritated the hell out of me because the way she's doing her narration, it's so it's too much. Like, she's too in this town of Burkittsville. Like, it's too dramatic. It's melodramatic, overly melodramatic. And then listening to the commentary, that's what they wanted. They wanted her to have that pretentious sort of film school head up her ass kind of, sense of overinflated importance in what she's doing. And having learned that, I'm now like, oh, Heather nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good acting on her part, definitely.
And then also the amateurism in the actual filming, because again, the filmmakers said if you just panned a little bit to the left, you would have the beautiful town of Burkittsville laid out down the hill. But instead, you have Heather framed on the right and the dirt mound framed on the left.
Yeah, that was very funny. I also did like how they talked about how when you see the sign of Burkittsville, they were talking about how the subsequent scene, which we'll talk more about in the next minute, but the subsequent scene is they said this is the only thing we shot in Burkittsville. So please don't go to Burkittsville.
Yeah.
Because clearly they've had problems with this, Burkittsville, the town, with all these tourists flooding in, saying, "Oh, where are the woods, man? Where's the Blair Witch woods?" And obviously that's the whole premise of Book of Shadows, isn't it? This tourist trade that comes out of this. But I'm sure that happened for real. And it's great. It's really funny to hear them on the commentary going, "Please don't visit them. There's nothing there for you to see, guys." But that itself shows, I think, the art imitating life aspect of this, in that the film itself became a bit of a legend within this town, in the sense of how, in the sense of how, popular the film was, but then the actual Blair Witch legend that's fake around Burkittsville is what they're going to. So it's quite funny the way that works on a meta level, I think.
For me, on subsequent viewings of the film, this is also the moment where I'm watching Heather doing her narration, and I'm thinking to myself, she wouldn't have made a good film. This would not have been a good documentary.
No.
So this is so tragic because it was all in vain.
Yeah. It would have been terrible at the end of it. What the cops ended up putting together is probably better than what she would have shot. But I think it's interesting, though, because there's a scene, isn't there, that again was another one that was added after Sundance, which is where she's talking about the ambitions she wants for the film.
Yes.
Where she's saying, I want to avoid cheese. I don't want this to be cheesy. The legend is unsettling enough. And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because she then goes so serious that it becomes comical in a way. You know, she gets it wrong in that she tries to make it really foreboding and serious without realising that she's going too far that way because she's determined. Well, this is it. This is the contradiction. On the one hand, she's determined to try and take it seriously, but on the other hand, she doesn't take the making of it seriously. You know, she doesn't respect the legend.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And she's so determined to do it right that she does it wrong.
Story of a million teenagers.
Like the whole thing. She's so determined to do the trip into the woods right. She's got her books, but she does it wrong.
Yep.
She's so determined to navigate them right, but she does it wrong. She
does it wrong. It's that hubris again. It's the hubris, isn't it? It's the hubris in Heather and the hubris of youth. You know, the hubris of of that they. You know, I mean, I remember. I don't know if you did anything when you were younger, Mike, at school, but I remember being in a subject we have over here called media studies when I was at in sixth form college. And I remember we were trying to make films on camcorders much like this. And this was around the same time, actually. I was doing that around 98, 99. So I was messing about with camcorders at the point that the Blair Witch Project came out, you know. And I remember there was a project where it was my media studies teacher said, I want you to make a trailer for a film. And I didn't think, okay, maybe I'll make something really low budget, you know, about a family, or, you know, maybe I'll make something like, you know, The Ice Storm by Ang Lee, really sort of low budget, family orientated, not low budget, but family orientated, you know. I tried to make a Bond film trailer, Mike, right, with one camcorder in the UK. You can imagine how that turned out, right? It was it was terrible. It was terrible. I maybe shot one tracking shot, and that was it. Right, before my media studies teacher went, I want the camera back. This is ridiculous.
I was going to say, I think Edgar Wright has done more with less, but then he is Edgar Wright.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, I've got Edgar Wright beat. But I think it is that youthful hubris that I think he's very good about this. I think that idea that they can nail this, they can do it and make this great piece of art about something. And in that sense, the film, I think, operates almost like a cautionary tale in a way. It's like an extension of be careful what you wish for. It's like, be careful what you try and... be careful about knowledge. Be careful of what you try and dig up, because sometimes you may find something that you are well out of your depth into. And so in that sense, I think it's almost like a metaphor for, if not growing up, then actually... you know, trying to bite off more than you can chew at a young age, which I'd not really thought about in that much depth. I feel like I'm grasping at a concept that I haven't fully figured out there, Mike, to be honest.
There's definitely a curiosity. I can't remember the phrase now. Curiosity killed the cat?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, curiosity killed the cat. Yeah, that's a good...
Let me do that from scratch again.
Okay. Yeah.
There's definitely a curiosity killed the cat vibe to, like, the whole movie, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good phrase. That's a good phrase to apply to this, definitely. Curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity killed the film students in this case.
I do dig some of the editing in this sequence as well, like because it's the first sort of extended black and white film bits that we get. And the way that it's assembled, the narration is a little much, but, you know, seeing like the gravestones and just kind of the pacing of it gives you... I don't know, there's more of a formality to it that creates more of a mood.
Yeah, I think so. I think it has, a somber, and I guess we'll talk more about that in the next minute. But there is a somber feeling to the kind of approach that she takes. Yeah, an imported seriousness that contrasts with the ragged sort of jokiness of what we're seeing so far, and the unformed nature of it. You know, this is the behind the scenes stuff that we're watching, essentially. If you look at it from Heather's film project point of view, the stuff that she would present to the world is the stuff she's shooting where she's saying, this is Burkittsville, formerly Blair, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas all them prattling about with the camera, and, you know, that's not what we're ever meant to see. We're never meant to see any of this. This is all the, you know, just the prep. And that's what makes it so interesting, really. And then gathering information as well. I mean, you get the first one of that. You get the waitress they talk to, who is actually Ed Sanchez's sister, younger sister. And they say, you know, do you believe in the Blair Witch? And she doesn't really know about it. That's what I found interesting. it's the older people when they interview them who know about this legend. She says, I think my older sister went to Blair High School. And she doesn't really seem to know about this legend, and she's young. So I just kept thinking, is this another example of how, Heather's interested in this legend, but is it contradictory to the age group in that they've kind of forgotten, and this oral history hasn't really passed down to the extent that it does in some of the older people who remember things vaguely, or they were young when they happened. I think that's really interesting.
It's something that, the town doesn't talk about unless prompted. They don't go out into the woods. I don't think they experience any trouble, or haven't experienced any trouble in some time. And it's that thing where it's like, don't poke the bear, right? Like, yeah. And then Heather comes and sort of stirs some stuff up. So
yeah. You wonder if it's anything that they just don't, whether it's conscious or not, that it's stuff that they just don't talk about anymore. Because, the whole thing you learn from Curse the Blair Witch is that these things tend to happen in 50-year cycles.
Yes.
And that's not really something that you get explicitly sort of said in the film. But it's there in the sense that they talk about Rustin Parr in the 40s, and that's 50 years-ish before. So it's like, well, is it just... 50 years is a long time. 50 years is enough time, I think, for sort of legends to sort of not really be passed down, especially as you get into a time where science increasingly overtakes myth and legend as you get towards the end of the 20th century. Kids, might read about urban myths on the internet, in creepypasta threads and things like that, but are they really going to have our parents and grandparents really telling these stories anymore, especially if they're scary? I just think that's fascinating, and that's why, when Heather comes in and, like you say, stirs it up, it's not something necessarily much of her generation would do, because they maybe just don't know about it, or they're not interested in it, or they just think it's not true. I don't know. I just like that aspect, that they make the young girl have no real idea about it.
Yeah. I also like I like the idea. This is straying a little bit from that idea, but we talked about the editing and the sort of artful images of the gravestones and whatnot. And if this film was put together by police officers, I think to myself, in the more sort of artful moments of the film,
yeah,
did one of these guys have help, or was he just sort of like, oh no, I want to honor this moment, or whatever?
Yeah, did he call the film department from her university and say, can you just help me put this together? It just looks, I quite like this shot to be tilted, or, yeah, it's quite funny. At least the nice aspect, I suppose, to this as well is that there is some recognition of the filming. They call it the ceremonial first slate, in that they're excited at actually using the slate for the first time, and there's a level of presentation to it all. I mean, there's one thing I clocked this time that I'd not noticed before was Heather putting makeup on in the car wing mirror.
Yep.
Which I didn't notice that before. And I was like, oh yeah, she puts like lipstick on or something like this. So she's concerned, even with the subject matter and everything, she's still concerned about presentation. She still wants it to look a certain way, or herself to look a certain way.
Well, if she's going to be...
So I like that.
If she's going to be the host of this documentary, I mean, yeah, she wants to look, air quote, presentable.
Yeah. It's just a nice little aspect having, I think, the film slate, and and Josh jokingly says, oh, maybe we should bloodlet on it. Which again is a little bit of a...
you kind of...
likes it.
One of the great things about this format, this minute podcast format, and we kind of talked about this at the very beginning, but just that interrogation of the material, and a lot of times, just as you're discussing things, like things reveal themselves, and for me, that moment with Heather in the rearview mirror, or in the side mirror, like doing her makeup, I was just like, yeah, of course, she's about to be on film, and she's conscious about that. But like the most famous image from this film, which is, the poster image, which is the trailer image of Heather with the snot, cold and just on the edge of sanity. And I never made the connection before that, here's this moment where she is concerned about presentation. She is, invested in this idea of this documentary and film and, potentially, I guess, maybe becoming well-known or famous for, making movies or whatever. And, by that point, much later in the film, she's just so ragged and it's just, she's a mess. And I don't know if there's like some connective tissue there, connection, but it's the kind of thing that comes up when you're like talking about it in this sort of format.
Yeah, with this granular detail. It's true. It's not something you necessarily draw because it's a very quick shot of her doing the makeup. But yeah, the fact she goes from that to then being this snotty mess by the end who doesn't care about how she looks because she's so terrified. Yeah, it's chilling. It's fascinating, really. That's a great thing to point out there. A great contradiction.
I do what I can.
This is why you're here, Mike.
I have to justify my being here, yeah.
Well, you've definitely done that, yeah. And you're going to be here one last time for us for this block anyway, for the next minute. Woo-hoo. So we'll roll on into that now. Yeah. So thanks again for listening, everyone. Remember to check us out at Blair Witch Min on Twitter if you haven't already, and listen to our latest episodes on the We Made This podcast network, which we're part of, and we'll give you a little bit of a peek as to what else is there in a second. But until next time, thanks again for listening, and stay out of the woods. Elsewhere on We Made This. Observing the Pattern, a Fringe podcast.
You'd have a doctor saying, oh, well, it's because, if someone's come back from the dead, it's because they were frozen and their body temperature warmed up, or, they ingested this poison that, made it look like death, or whatever it was, rather than it being a miracle that's seen as the more outlandish thing. So it's quite interesting seeing the roles reversed here. Because I know how sympathies lie with Walter, but then equally, I felt kind of sorry for the priest who's just like, right, you realise this is mad, right? Yeah. There's no part of this that is safe.
Life's milestones.
Sleepwalkers. Took him to see that.
That Stephen King thing with the evil cat people.
About the incestuous cat people, yeah.
Goodness sake.
And also Natural Born Killers was another one I went to see with my dad.
How old were you?
Well, he used to sneak me in. I was about 14. Yeah, so he'd go and buy the tickets, and I'd go and get the popcorn, and he'd be like, right, let's go. Bearing in mind, my dad at the time was the detective sergeant of the West Midlands Drug Squad.
The time is now. A Millennium podcast.
Yeah, I think when we get to Skull and Bones, the final scene in that one where he gives his reasons to Emma, I think that has been criticised quite much. But then obviously we'll look at Peter Watts over the course of the season.
But that's perfect. That's
yeah.
perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how many times that's what people in his position say.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you hate me and you think I'm doing bad, but when the food runs out, who are you going to blame? That goes back to 3 Days of the Condor, right?
Yeah.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.